Omi, welcome to Conversations Live.
Thank you very much for having me over here. Beautiful
Uh,
setting.
Excellent to have you. We are here to talk about Mauritius and renewable energy.
Exactly.
Now, Mauritius has this ambitious plan of transitioning to 60% of its total energy. So having
Yeah.
60% of renewable energy by 2030.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
Very far, very far. We have seen just after the budget presentation, Minister Asiavaden actually presenting the figures. In 2015, we were at 21% of renewable energy production, and we've actually gone back. We've gone back up to 14.8% now of our total energy being produced by renewable energy. So I think we're not just behind, we are even going backwards from what our objective are.
For us to understand the energy landscape in Mauritius, can you give us some facts, figures?
Energy production in Mauritius, obviously it starts with the CB producing the electricity. We're using coal and fuel at literally 80% at the moment to produce our energy. We have 18% of solar and a little bit of hydro and wind power that is coming in. And that is being produced by turbines from the CB and then from our IPPs and a little bit the solar that is coming through the different schemes that are available to individuals.
And in terms of the current renewable energy infrastructures that are there in Mauritius to contribute to that 18%, what are we talking about?
We're talking about 2,000 households. We're talking about 12 megawatt of solar capacity at the moment, which we need to really push forward up to to reach another 40% additional on top of that. We are nowhere near that. Battery energy storage system, what we have available and what was targeted since 2020 was 50 megawatt of storage. And at the moment, I think we are about 12.6, 12.8 capacity. So yes, we're very, very lagging behind. And our time frame of 2030 is coming very, very fast.
We've talked about hydro. We've got a wind turbine installation in the east of Mauritius, and we've got a few solar farms that's set up around the island. Do we have any data that tells us of their performance over the last number of years that they've been installed, and how do we take that to go forward?
I think the solar farms that we're talking about have only come through specific schemes. The two main projects there, we had the Saraco and Terra, who is developing the other one in the north. This is part of that 18.6% of renewable energy that we are producing today. So to increase that capacity, that would mean that we would need to convert more land space so that we can reach, I think we are aiming to reach about 500 megawatt in terms of solar production. But those two major.
But before we talk about increasing solar, have we assessed wind, solar, and
Yeah, well, we just have it in very minor percentage. Like we know, for example, wind is representing 2.1%. Hydro is about 3.8% at the moment, and then the rest is with the solar energy production, whether it's combined solar farms or private individuals producing. So we do not have a proper monitoring, and I think this is where we've got it wrong, is if we can have those real statistics, this is what it's going to save us, because it's not about the production today, the quantity that we're producing, but how much leverage that would mean in terms of savings. I mentioned 280 million US dollars of coal and fuel. If we can increase the solar energy or renewable energy in any aspect on one side, that would mean that 280 million will actually be reduced. And that's money that stays in the government for other purposes.
And obviously, when it comes to finance, and we talk about international institutions, we've heard a lot from the AFD.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot from the African Bank. We've also heard from obviously Proparco, which is part of the AFD, and the World Bank, and they've all shown a large interest into pushing finance for renewable energy in Mauritius. And that appetite has only increased in the last couple of years, which tells me that finance is there, but why aren't the projects being developed, and why aren't we seeing more and more projects being developed, and a push for nationwide projects to help us in that transition for more renewable energy?
Well, again, it's all about infrastructure. I think you're totally right saying that the funds are there. I think we amongst all the African countries developing renewable energy, we are probably the third country that have actually benefited more in terms of grants, in terms of scheme. We shouldn't forget that through the COP26 and COP27 agreement, Mauritius signed an agreement for 800 million US dollars from the IMF to help us in our transition towards renewable energy. And that money has been dispatched as and when it's visible on the UNDP website, where like all the projects that have been funded through that fund.
Why are we using that money to upgrade the grid?
Because unfortunately, when you look at the projects that are listed on the UNDP website, the fundings have been going into different aspects. You need a committee, for example, in terms of assessing what is the capacity of production of electricity. Just that committee building this whole framework in behind it is already pumping some money from that fund, rather than going into a concrete infrastructural development that is actually producing. So there's a lot of money that has scattered a little bit around into preparation of the project, and then when you reach the end of these all these committees and reports comes out, then you need to implement it. And then what happens when comes the time to implement it, there is either a political shift, there is either another situation that comes up, and this is the difficulty for Mauritius, is we are so permeable to all different aspects from everywhere else around the world, that coming into what we want to do is always impacted by what is happening from there.
You talk about the budget. Now, obviously, this is something that's been talked about for the last 20 years. there is this overall consensus of countries needing to transition over to renewable energy. We've obviously got targets. Do we have a national plan? Do we have a national vision?
Again, what is written and what is being done are being, unfortunately, two different things at the moment. On the same side that the government has actually announced the 30 billion rupees for renewable energy, we've also seen a lot of other incentives for smart cities development, solar farms development, but also we are talking about a power barge at the moment to complement for what we are actually producing, because obviously our infrastructures are a little bit behind also in terms of technology.
And if we were to look at the last 15, 20 years, what's been that vision, those steps to bring everyone together into understanding the importance of renewable energy and getting that done?
Well, it's a lot about information and education. I think because of our cultural distribution, we are a lot impacted by Africa. We are a lot impacted by Asia as well. India has been one of the pioneers, together with China, in terms of renewable energy, but more specifically solar energy. They have moved way ahead of us. They've had power plants, solar power plants, or hydro, or even wind turbine installed for over 15, 20 years. Mauritius has really known renewable energy and solar energy over the last 10 years, really. Yes, we've had the wind turbines have been installed for 12 years or so. But have we got statistics of how those installations have benefited us in terms of the economy, but in terms of our objective of 2030 to get to the 60% margin?
We've also got the hydro plant in
Yes,
Penchant-Pai.
which is
This has been there for
20, 25 odd
very long
years.
time.
Yes, but that's where we are lagging behind. Infrastructures, ideas have come up in the past, and we have tried to use what we have seen worked elsewhere. But have we really readapted it into our general context, knowing that how far we are? Have we got the technicality behind improving these infrastructures, maintaining them, or actually upgrading the system to make them better? So between what is said that they want to do and actually putting all the resources that we could have towards it is where we have actually.
So let's paint the picture of the now. So as an island state, what is our primary power producer, from what source, and how is that being matched with renewable energy that we already have going?
58% of our electricity is produced by CB, and that is through turbine. We're talking about the hydro, a few of the renewable energy, talking about the wind turbine as well, and a little bit of solar. The rest is produced by our IPPs. So we've got our three main ones: Terra, Omnicane, and Medine is in it. And that is supposed to be biomass. And biomass, unfortunately, as we know, it's mainly sugarcane production, byproduct, that is actually producing this electricity. But when you are in a country where you're actually growing sugarcane and you're having one harvest a year, you obviously only have product to produce electricity for that period of harvest. So we say about 3-4 months of during harvest time or after harvest time, then you have the bagasse or all of the biomass. But the rest of the time, the other 8-7 months, those IPPs are also producing electricity using the traditional coal, heavy fuel, oil, etc., which doesn't align really with what we do, but this is how we can compete with that. But again, we have seen them having infrastructures that are over 20 years, 25 years. We have wind, we have the ocean, and then we have sun. Which one would actually be more viable for us today to respond immediately to our energy crisis situation?
You earlier said that the CB is producing just over 50%
Yeah.
of our requirement.
Yeah.
How do you assess that figure in 2025?
I think because the CB is also the only regulating body for our energy distribution, and again, who actually runs the CB, and we've seen not only just over the last 5 years, but over the last 10 years, the CB has been running at a deficit budget every year. That being because they have a lot of customers that are not actually following up with the bills. We've seen discussions about that. So many, and these are not just private entities. These are actually local entities. We're talking about district council. We're talking about municipalities. We're talking about public governmental infrastructures that are actually lagging behind. So how do we minimize? For what the way I see it is, when we need to rely on ships to bring us coal and fuel over, we're seeing a little bit what is the geopolitical situation at the moment. Yeah. But then we have also a very aging system. CB exists from way beyond our independence time, and the infrastructures have been gradually just repaired and moving on alongside it.
And I want to ask you about this. I wanted to ask you about our grid.
Yeah.
That is the foundation of our system, right? Yes. How modern is our grid? When we talk about renewable energy, we talk about decentralizing electricity. Right? And we talk about making consumers into prosumers.
Exactly.
How is our grid today to allow for such a vision?
Definitely. I mean, you just need to step out on the streets and you look at our electricity pole, you look at our transformators, you look at about how the electric lines are actually lined up. That gives you a very broad idea that we are very, very far behind. And that is why the CB is struggling so much in actually opening the grid to private individuals to become prosumers, or even, yes, we have just seen recently the CB opening up a little bit wider the MSDG scheme and the SSDG scheme from 5 kilowatt to 15 and from 15 to 50 for MSDGs, which should support our system. But then when you look at the cost, because if you as an MSDG today, as a medium scale energy producer, you want to produce 50 kilowatt of electricity, the cost doesn't involve just your personal infrastructure. You actually have to go onto the grid yourself to improve the system for your electricity that you're producing to be reverted to them. So obviously that causes a problem, because the return on investment as a business, you do not see that happening. Although you're signing a contract for 20, 25 years with the CB, you don't make money. You are spending money today in the forecast that in the next 20, 25 years, this is what you are actually saving. But who's going to do that?
Talk to me about what is lacking in the grid. When you say it is not modern, it is not adequate, what are the issues at hand?
Equipment, definitely the infrastructure itself. We also have a lot of unfortunate lobbies as well from IPPs, because their contract, and again, so many times I've had to do researches into how the electricity is being produced and distributed. There seems to be a barrier into the entry for private developers, prosumers, etc., into the system, because the contract that the IPPs hold with the CB in terms of the capacity production, in terms of the price they're selling to the CB, are unknown to the public so far. So none of the contracts of the IPPs are public, and you can't even have access to it. So it's very difficult. There's a lot of private entities today that want to go off grid. They do not really have that option unless they really have the investment capacity to really push forward and hope that in the long term, because what we know is electricity price is never going to go down. That is the fact.
Yeah.
If you cannot save the money today to actually reach when the price will go up, this is when you will actually see the value of your investment. But do businesses and corporates or individuals have the means to access to buy these infrastructures today is where the problem is.
Now we're talking about demand, and when we talk about that, we obviously talk about the largest consumers of electricity. And if we are to look at the corporates, these are malls, commercial centers, business parks. Do we have data on who our biggest energy consumers are? And how do we make them energy self-sufficient? Can we do that?
When we started this conversation, Kabir, I said to you that the one thing that we have 365 days a year is the sun. How much are we capitalizing on this? This is the problem. You're talking about 11, 12 malls, if we take in some of the minor ones as well. We're talking about 100,000 square meters of parking spaces with all these malls combined together. Most of the malls have got solar infrastructure installed on them at the moment, but obviously this is limited in terms of the sizes of the malls itself. They have other infrastructures, air conditioning, whatever, machinery that is operating on the roof, so they're limited space. But if you take all the malls together, and we're talking about 100,000 square meters of parking lots, you take only 10% of those parking lots and you convert them into solar power generation, you can literally cover those 11 malls demands in electricity. Then the next one would be 127, 130 odd hotels and resorts that we have. Obviously, because of our island aspects, our hotels have a lot of thatch roofs, they have a lot of iron steel roof, and obviously they do have their technical areas, which is all concrete, which they are using for electricity. We've seen La Pirogue has done a lot of the parking lot. Technical zone is all covered with solar, but there's so much more area that can be used. Yes, solar panels being fixed on thatch roof is a big problem, aesthetic-wise, but also due to heavy winds and cyclones and conditions. So, but yes, are we exploring the alternatives of...
And I think this goes back and links to that national vision that I initially asked you. Yeah. Obviously, there's the vision, and then there's mitigation, and there's legislation. Are you seeing those three working together so far as renewable energy is concerned?
No, definitely not. The way I see Mauritius today, we're a small island, we are very far from everything. We're dependent on a lot of things, imports, foods, etc. When you run a country, you're literally running a business with the people being the major shareholders. Then you have the businesses, which are the investments of those shareholders. And then you have the political configuration around, which is a little bit like the managerial aspect of a business. So you have a prime minister who's supposed to be the director, and then you have or CEO, and then you have all the ministers that are the managers. When it comes down to those managers, I do not see those people having the vision. Or do they sit with the director and come to the board meeting and say, okay, we have a problem, for example, in our energy department, and we need more energy because there's more infrastructures today, there are more malls, there are more RES, IRS, whatever that has been built. And we are aspiring to become a development country. And when you want to develop, then you need infrastructure. And when you need infrastructure, you need energy to power those infrastructures. So when it comes down to all of that, the decision making then comes down to the director or the CEO to decide, okay, I can't make more money for my business because I cannot produce more. But what I can do is I can reduce the cost of my business today. And how one thing I can do to reduce that cost is by not spending $280 million every year on buying coal and fuel to produce energy, because we have solar energy. So tax rebate for these corporates, tax incentives for locals. Now we're seeing, I think you can rebate if I got this right in the latest budget, 150,000 rupees can be deducted on your tax annually. For someone that is reaching the point of paying tax, 150,000 rupees over a year is not relevant. You need more incentive for that. How much you're selling your electricity to the CB. As a prosumer today, under the SSDG, you pay, I think you get paid ₹4.20. It used to be $3.75, but it's gone to $4.20 now. When you're making an investment of 380,000 for 5 kilowatt, whatever you need for your house today, and you seeing your money is coming back on in 15 years or 18 years, that doesn't really make sense. Does the person has the money now? We have a lot of international funding that is coming into the country that is obviously managed through governmental other bodies. But where is that money going? How is that distribution of our green movement?
And talking about access to renewable energy and therefore cheaper electricity, you need to have the ability to have access, firstly, which brings me to the point of energy poverty. When you don't have the ability to access renewable energy, then you've got to pay the prices that are there. Now, obviously, there is what we call the social register in Mauritius. The government has announced the implementation of over 10,000 solar home
through the SSDG, yeah.
And I think we are at around 2,000 implemented as of now. Obviously, the spirit is good to tackle energy poverty. First question is, so far as that measure is concerned, where are we at? 2,000 over 10,000 is still very low. What is your perception there to start with?
The barrier, again, I think it's all about the administrative. Yes, it is it is a very highly praisable initiative to go into, in particular, the social housing. But that means that unless someone doesn't know that they can actually benefit that, they come and apply. They don't go and apply for it, then it stays there, and the money stays there, and the production stays the same. It's all about decision making, and the government today has the power to be at the forefront of this complete transition that we need to move into renewable energy. We talked about the social housing, houses that are being built that will probably be delivered by 2025, 2026. Those social housing could actually be completely independent in their own demand and needs for energy, if only the government is building those houses. Many people that we are looking at into that segment are either retired pensioners or they are living together with the other members of the family. It's not just about installing. Yes, the CB can say we've got another 8,000 people that we are going to put solar panels on their roof, and they're going to be producing electricity. And then what? Once you've done it, then what happens? Who's coming to maintain that for these people? Because they obviously are on a social scale that they cannot already afford to buy it in the first place. Now, if they need to hire someone that comes in every 2 months to clean the panels, because obviously the production will reduce.
When we look at NHDCs and the newly built
Yes.
social housing done by the government, those are more compact, more flat surface, purpose-built type buildings. The government could easily install, the CB could install and manage it themselves, rather than look at it from the perspective of giving it from unit to unit. So it becomes more of a social integrated producing unit. Could that be done?
Well, I mean, you have identified that potential. And this is where sometimes you ask yourself the questions: are the people that are taking the decisions aware of what is being done elsewhere? You said it yourself. Just those NHDC houses and the new, because they are not only low class, they are also a middle class section. Social houses that are being built, I think that's around Palma or Catrabon area. Why are these not already part of the whole project? That comes down to what the project initially starts as a cost, and what it ends up. Because many projects, and we have seen a lot of parliamentary debates about that, is many of those projects starts at a very figurative amount, and then when the project ends, you've seen that it's been inflated by 2-3 times, because one, there has been a delay, construction cost has increased, and so on. But besides imposing this onto the government infrastructures, I think where we should actually look at is, you mentioned initially, who are the biggest consumers. We've talked about the malls, we've talked about the hotels, but then it comes down to all these luxury residences and villas and smart cities that are being developed. If we start with them already, because they are the highest consumers of those electricity, a small household with an old pensioner couple living in it, they are under the 3 kilowatt requirements that we need. How much of an impact, even if you go up to 10,000, I would rather go to 2,000 of the biggest consumer, and you are investing $350,000 into a villa. If I tell you you're paying 360,000 instead of 350,000, but your villa is fully autonomous on electricity, I don't think that will deter our investors to come into our country. So that's probably the first step forward. And once you have actually reduced the demand for these, because these are new infrastructures. We talked about February 575. It's going to go even more in December, January 25, 26 anyway. But at least you have stopped your increased production just because you need to produce more for these new entities. Suddenly you don't need to produce more for that. So now what you can do is you can channel your resources towards the local. How many government infrastructures today can go eco-certified green energy production? Very, very, very few. Personally, the first step has to come from the government, they have to actually demonstrate themselves that this is what they trust, this is what they want to do, this is what they are doing, and then we can encourage the people to come forward.
And obviously, we're talking a lot about solar. With solar comes batteries.
Yes.
Something that we've not talked about. There's a lot of infrastructure that comes with solar power. What is the narrative with batteries and stored energy so far as the national grid is concerned?
Yeah. When we need energy in general, in particular in storage, that means that we need to keep it for at another period of time, or when the demand actually increases. We do not have only the solar energy that requires, in terms of renewable energy, that requires batteries. Wind power will also requires battery, or any other source of energy that you are actually developing will require the battery power. The scare is obviously with the environmental aspect, but we are talking about batteries today compared to 10, 12 years ago. The technology behind developing battery systems have evolved so much. Battery lifetime have been increased by 10, 15 years in some cases, which gives us a leverage. What we need to look at more consciously is how we can produce now, knowing that and trusting development in general, that in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, when the batteries that we are using will become old or inefficient, in 15 years' time, we already have a mean to actually recycle or convert those batteries, or maybe just upcycle them in any other way. So yes, we are very far behind in terms of, but that's also because we are not producing enough. When you're producing only 18% of your renewable energy today, then battery or storage system is not really an issue. It's again come down to when we talk about battery, we talk about also water resources. For example, this is why we have reservoirs, because we need to stock up the water at some place, so when comes the time when we need it, then we... Do you really think that we have a problem with water resources in Mauritius? No, we have plenty of water. It's just the way the water is managed, the resources, our infrastructures behind the water, and again,
it's similar with power.
It's exactly the same with power. If we do not have, we're not making the most of what we can actually produce today, we don't really need to stack up so much power, because if everybody can produce what they are using, then why do we need to store energy for? Even if we have a cyclone, that doesn't mean that we don't have sun. And again, now it's important to also talk about the different ways of we can produce renewable energy. We've really made a lot of emphasis on solar energy. Wind turbine, we've seen countries in the Scandinavian countries are nearly 40-50% producing their own their renewable energy, but using offshore wind farms. Is that adaptable to Mauritius? I don't think so. Then we have thermal electricity, which we started with the waterfalls, etc. Yes, that can be a very considerate option for us, but that requires a lot of infrastructure, and then you have to leverage, okay, how much are you going to produce with 10 rupees of investment with thermal, and how much are you going to produce with 10 rupees investment in solar? Then we are talking about tidal energy, which I understand the government wants to launch down in the south at Suyak, collecting waves. We know, for those that are involved into the renewable energy industry, energy travels very badly. So where you're producing it is where you need to be consuming it. And that's when there is the minimal transition from the production point to the usage point, is where you have the optimum capacity. When you're producing waves, I mean, we're talking about 3 kilometers offshore of Mauritius to install a wave energy production. Fair enough, if Japan wants to grant us a free installation, we're not going to say no because we want to see how that works. And if that can help us into our capacity building, fair enough, then we'll take it. But are we capable ourselves to invest that sort of in infrastructure? Then the next thing we come to is biomass, which we talked about earlier, sugarcane, landfill, gas production as well. Is this adaptable for Mauritius? At this stage, I would say yes, because we've seen all our landfills are overcrowded, are over produced at the moment. But again, what is the production cost to what you actually benefit compared to what everything else exists today in Mauritius? And this is why, for me, in this, if I would look at this and in that particular framework, solar is our solution today. Solar is our solution today to produce and consume today. Yes, battery storage will have to come alongside it, of course. But then we have to also consider we are very limited in terms of resources and infrastructure. We are a small island. When it will come down to break down these solar panels, recycling them, do we have the resources? And again, that's the next thing we would need to look at.
And when we talk about resources, we talk about skill. We talk about our ability to understand, comprehend, and adapt. Do we have the right talent in Mauritius?
Yes, we do have the talent. Yes, we do have, I think, the framework, but the enforcement of the framework is where we are lagging behind. Today, most of the people, of our students, our youth that are coming out of school, they want to do AI, they want to do IT. The manual work is not being given enough value. And when we are in an industry which is thriving as such, obviously, I think the decision makers should actually show more concern that suddenly this can be a new industry for us. That could be a new outsourcing as well, because Mauritian talents that could be going elsewhere. Things that we can do in Mauritius, thanks to our geopolitical situation, closeness to Africa, closeness to Asia, bilingual, literally from birth, if not saying trilingual from birth, which means that gives us access to so many other countries and continents. Mauritians are very talented people. They just need that extra cushion that will give them that comfort to thrive in there.
I want to go back to the IPPs.
Yeah.
So obviously there is a contract between
Yes.
the CB and the IPPs. There's obviously clear expectation of what needs to be produced. But obviously, like you said earlier, those IPPs can only produce a certain amount of renewable energy.
Yeah.
And the rest is obviously produced using fossil fuels.
Yes.
Do you think that there should be a minimum amount of percentage of renewable energy produced by the IPPs to force that transition and try and move away as much as possible from fossil fuels?
It's a very interesting question and trying to look at it from that sense. How would the IPPs be able to produce more renewable energy? IPPs today are the ones that detain the majority of land around these electricity producing areas. If they want to go further into renewable energy, that means that either they have to increase production of biomass, which is impossible in terms of sugarcane, because that would mean that we have to grow more sugarcane. We can't at the moment. We are also talking about the agri-farming business today. So we need our land. Land is our prime resources. Can we look at an alternative to sugarcane that can produce us twice a year, for example, or maybe a full year in terms of a rotation production crop that will create more biomass, that will make them be able to...
Can we import biomass?
Yes, but again, when you're importing, then it's coming with the freights, with the cargoes, etc. Sweden, for example, talking about importing, Sweden has done something pretty impressive. Sweden has become 100%. They're producing their heating and their energy through converting their waste at the moment, and they've gone so far in reducing and removing their waste that they are actually importing waste from other countries around Sweden. So then they can, because obviously all these countries are interconnected with the pipelines and so on. So they are taking the waste from the other countries, producing energy that they are sending it back to them for free, because that is also helping them to do that. Now, we can't do that because we are so far. Importing biomass would means that we have to bring stuff from crops from Madagascar, which is probably the nearest one for us. But we can alter we've seen sugarcane value today. And then again, in the last budget, tax are also increasing, which means that our sugar product are being less and less valued compared to competition. There are other crops. Hemp, for example, in Australia, they have started using hemp production for biomass production. And hemp means that it's 6-month production, and then after 6 months you harvest, and then in the next 6 months, so you get 2 year, you get two production in 1 year. And if used more efficiently, in particular because of the climate that we have in Mauritius, north, south, east, west, although we are a microclimate country, the weather changes very differently. So your production in the north can be different from your production to the east, and so on and so on. So having a rotation in there, that would help the IPVS.
But who's responsible for delivering this transition? Because after our chat today, it's unclear to me. Is it the CB? Is it the Ministry of
Energy
that runs the energy? Is it the IPPs? Who ultimately takes ownership of this transition?
Who has the power today is definitely the IPPs, because when you depend 48% on the IPPs to actually produce your electricity, then we have seen, and that was discussed again last week in the Parliament. Most of these IPPs turbines also are over 20-25 years old, so they need investment in their own infrastructure to be able to keep producing what they are actually producing today, let alone what they need to increase in terms of the production. Their machines are already at their cap at the moment. So then the decision would become what will come from those that regulates the energy flow in Mauritius. And is that the government decision? Yes. Do they have the power to influence the other producers? This is a very delicate question to answer. But yes, it has to come from a consensus of government takes the decision, sets up the real framework. Okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do. Yes, you need to change your machine, but no more land conversion. We've seen a lot of solar farms that have come up recently. There's been an issue about one of the producers that were coming through. But do we converting land, sugarcane, for just producing electricity or for infrastructures, is that gonna solve our other problem that is also lurking behind, which is food production for Mauritius? Because this is another thing that we are really spending a lot of money.
That is a big problem.
Yeah. So energy is at the source of everything, because when you do not have to depend so much on exterior factors for your electricity, for your power production, that means you can produce more.
Whilst listening to you, and I'm not a specialist into the field, but I'm just having this thought.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell you about it. So when a country like Mauritius needs to have a vision for renewable energy, obviously, rather than looking at a big number, which is what we need to be producing, what's the number that we need to be producing
for
electricity at any point of time?
It's at the moment we're about 2.8 gigawatts.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but we need 3.6. This is what we would really need to be stable.
So obviously taking that figure and breaking it down to sectors. So we've got our manufacturing sector, we've got our big eaters, which are the malls and the hotels and all the rest. And then we've got the business segment, the corporates, and then the household, and then, social housing and all the rest, right? And I mean, we should really have a vision which goes in all those different ways together in parallel, and tackle each of them separately with a different plan. Because then at least, for instance, recently we've seen electricity cut happen more and more often. But it's because we have a grid which is working as one for everything.
Exactly.
But if we had the ability of cutting that grid into segments and really being able to control them separately and tell ourselves that, okay, this segment, the household, we open up the pipe, we let people become prosumers, we make the malls become self-sufficient, we help hotels and we sit down with them to try and see how they become self-sufficient in whichever way, shape or form, and try and look at this issue from a segment perspective rather than a one big figure of 3.6, which doesn't seem to be solving the problem because it's a big figure and we don't know how to do it.
Exactly.
That way, everybody is participating into the journey and understand the journey.
Yeah.
Now, that's just me saying this from our conversation.
Yeah.
But how do we get this done?
Well, then that will lead to the other aspect is if you want everybody to be participating to the production without impacting on the demand from the network, then you want to go with the battery system. So you're producing, you're consuming at your home, and then you are storing for nighttime, for whenever you need it. And then you're completely off-grid.
But then again, that could also be a community-based system. It doesn't necessarily need to be a household system.
Yeah.
Where communities have panels, but are also producing towards a storage system, which then helps the community.
Yeah.
Therefore, cost access to the system is cheaper, the cost is cheaper, and the maintenance is easier because it's a community-based system rather than a household system.
Yeah.
But having said that, what are your thoughts? And are there any models that we can learn from, countries that we can learn from that have been very successful in their renewable journey?
Because we are so far behind in terms of the development of renewable energy, obviously we can look at a few other countries that have actually moved much ahead. Spain and Portugal, two countries that have increased their renewable energy by, I think Spain is about 48% now, and Portugal is on the 36%. And just a little note on this is in February or April this year, there was a huge power cut in the majority of Spain and Portugal. And a lot of people actually tried to deter that to the fact that it was because of renewable energy, solar energy being input into the system that had caused this. Recent studies have showed that it has nothing to do with the renewable energy. But again, it's all down to how the grid is being managed. So even these countries have sustained major changes into their grid format, but because they have moved so fast and so far ahead on the trend, um, they have been able to open it to particulars, individuals, corporates to be themselves power producers and contributing into the system or reducing their impact onto the system. The CEB infrastructures, although now through the new all the new developments that are coming in, obviously they are using newer equipment, but are we replacing our old infrastructures? Is there a plan behind that into how we can improve our existing infrastructure to allow more renewable energy being input into the system and everybody becoming independent?
It's really down to having that mindset of being sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think if the permits for property development, for even residential homes,
tied.
for bigger malls and all the rest, if those permits were more aligned to having a sustainability aspect in it, then a lot of things would change.
Yeah. Setting up regulation is one thing, but ensuring that it is actually implemented. And again, it's how do we move from that? Because it's not just about having the electricity produced today on your roof or for your community and so on. How do we actually manage that electricity that is produced?
Sometimes it's just about a cultural shift. You know, once you're past the financing aspect, once you've passed all those aspects, we are just used to how things are, and we do not realize the importance of shifting, and therefore, do you think Mauritius has made the cultural shift it needs to?
I think any country or any society gets really the impact when it comes down initially to the financial aspect. What do we have to do today? We definitely have to look at our infrastructure. We definitely have to look at our IPPs contracts. Is it even beneficial to Mauritius to continue depending at nearly 50% on IPPs for our electricity? If we take IPPs on one side and we take the population on the other side, I think the population will represent a bigger input than what the IPPs can actually produce if we can actually group all these people into producing electricity today.
We are where we are. How long do you think we can sustain? Can Mauritius sustain with the way things are now?
Worrying. I think the talk in general around the country is really the scare of when summer will come up, because obviously all the ACs will turn on again and all the machinery will start to be demanding. Where do we get that extra power coming from? Are we ready for the cultural mind shift into understanding that we are not just needing energy, but we're needing clean energy? We hope that the political crisis won't be impacting us too much in the near future, but yes, this is where our coal and fuel comes from. So yeah, we are in a situation today where we have to take the decisions now, but also for the next 10 years at least. I think is going to be very, very critical for us in our shift into renewable energy.
Omi, we're now going to move to the fun part, the ending part, which is rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you quick questions, and I need honest, quick answers from you.
Okay.
So, to start, solar, wind, hydro, or storage? Which one would it be for you?
Solar. 365 days a year, doesn't matter what happens, we have solar here.
One country you think Mauritius should learn from when it comes to clean energy?
Spain, Sweden, Scandinavian countries. I think Africa is also catching up a lot now. Kenya and Rwanda has moved significantly, but not to forget Costa Rica.
Okay. The biggest myth in renewable energy?
That it doesn't work.
Coal in 2030?
It will still be there. It will be more expensive.
And in one word, what does Mauritius need most to unlock its energy future?
Bold decisions.
Omi, thank you very much for coming to Conversations Live.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really hope for a faster future in this transition to renewable energy in Mauritius.
Yes, thank you. Well, we believe so. Mauritius is doing the Mauritius Clean Energy Week starting the 16th of July, where we're going to be hosting quite a few events about renewable energy. So raising awareness, and hopefully we can change the cultural mindset.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.